On the Road with Kelly and Bob is brought to you by Mueller Metal Roofs and Buildings. Made in America, made to last. Coming up on this episode...
I retired in 2017, and through church, through friends, I had gotten into prison ministry type programs and came across a Storybook project of Arkansas, and I just made a call the next day and got my security clearance, and a couple months later was in a prison.
Hi, we're Kelly
and Bob Phillips, and we're on the perpetual road trip of America's back roads,
where the journey is always the destination. Thanks for joining us for this episode of On the Road with Kelly and Bob.
I was just thinking about how important reading has been in my life. When I was a little kid, I grew up in a neighborhood where there weren't a lot of other little kids. And so I had to make my own entertainment. So I read a lot. I was always reading, one of the Hardy Boy, books.
And I think the same way you do. Reading is so important. It was so important to me when I was pregnant with both of the boys that I read to them when I was pregnant with them.
Do they remember that?
I think they do. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and along the same vein, one of the most important things in my life, one of my most important memories, is how my mother would routinely read to me at bedtime.
On a day-to-day basis, most of us in the United States enjoy our freedom, the ability to move about the country unrestricted, to live our lives peacefully and think what we want to think.
But imagine what it would be like if every time you walked into your bedroom, you heard this.
If you've never been in a prison before, it's quite a different experience. You hear the gate slamming behind you, and everything is just weird and different in a prison. So we kind of come out of our comfort zone and we go into this weird place where we're not in control. I mean, I've never felt unsafe, but we are not the ones in control there.
For the more than 1 million people incarcerated in federal and state prisons and local jails in the U.S., the familiar sound of a jail cell door slamming shut is commonplace.
And for most of us, the first thing that comes to mind is, well, there is a reason they are there. True, says Denise Chai, but what wrong did their children do?
I was born in New Jersey. My parents had immigrated from Canada. I moved a lot as a kid, so New Jersey, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Washington State, North Carolina. Then I lived overseas for 20 years in the UK, Korea, Hong Kong, and Singapore. I retired in 2017 from finance, so I had been an equity research analyst with Bank of America. So that was my career. Storybook was started in the late 90s by someone named Pat Opplinger in Cherokee Village, Arkansas. So she was a retired educator. She'd been an educator for almost 40 years, but she felt like she still had something to give and wanted to continue to do what she could. And so she had heard of a similar program in Illinois, and it was kind of brewing within her for a while, and one day she stood up in church and said what was on her heart, and who's with me?
Denise Chai says she didn't start the fire for the Storybook project, but she did pick up the torch. And that torch lights the way for her and lots of other people as they voluntarily journey into prisons all over the state of Arkansas.
And it's all to make sure children don't lose their parents and grandparents just because they're in jail.
Several times a year we go into prisons and we bring several milk crates full of children's books. We have a number of volunteers, maybe 6 to 10 volunteers, just depending on how many people we're going to record that day. We go to the visitation room or classroom or chapel and lay the books out like it's a scholastic book fair or a bookstore. And people come through and they choose a book. Then they're going to go sit down at a table and write a message in the book. And the message is usually something to the effect of how much they, love and miss their kids or grandkids and think about them every day, and they draw a little heart. And then they'll come sit with a volunteer who has a recording device, and they'll give a message to their family and read the book to the children and then give another message.
Hi, babies. Mama loves and misses you so much. I'm so proud of how much you have both grown.
The lanterns are just so buoy. I had to hide them away. Promise, said Pippa, you won't tell a soul. We must not spoil the surprise. You won't believe your eyes. And a swoosh made a face with the boo. When Pippa first used her fairy wand, it was shiny, sparkly, and new.
The prisoners who are given the opportunity to read to their kids don't know much about Storybook Project.
But Denise has a feeling that most of them are, in some way, hoping they can start to make things right by participating. And that all starts by reading a book.
They know that they're going to be able to read a book and send a book to their kids or their grandkids for free. Usually when people are incarcerated, they've already burnt bridges. They might not have had a lifestyle that was conducive to reading bedtime stories at night. And it's a whole new way for them to connect with their family. And of course, they're being a good example, encouraging their kids to read more, and for the kids to be able to hear that they are loved and missed and that they're constantly being thought of and how proud their mom or dad is of them. It's invaluable. And for the family members who are going to get this recording and hear this and probably have never heard that person read a book to their kids before. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah.
Just to see them in this light, putting their best foot forward.
I miss y'all. I love you. I hope you would listen to this for a bedtime story. E is for eagle, who soars through the sky.
When you sit across the table from the person who's reading, your mind will kind of go all over the place because you're thinking, oh yeah, I used to read this to my kids, or I read that when I was little. But you're also thinking, what are you doing here? How'd you get here? what happened in your life?
Do you have those conversations with them?
Only if they start them, only if they volunteer, but we would never ask. But
You don't pry, but if they're willing to talk about it, you're willing to listen.
Sure.
So that happens sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes people don't have other people to talk to, and there's something on their heart and they just want to get it off.
How does that feel if they do open up to you? And it seems like it would get to you to hear the story, no matter what the story is.
I mean, it's certainly not every reader that we encounter. Again, I think it makes me feel very privileged that they would kind of trust us to kind of see that glimpse of their lives.
What was it that spoke to you about this whole project?
I mean, I've got 3 kids, and I think the things that, in everyday family life can seem like such a grind, the laundry, the dinners, the dishes, the carpool, whatever it is, right? It's such a grind, but it is also such a privilege, and I can't imagine being separated from my kids.
So we're sitting here griping about having to do the dishes after dinner or, something mundane. And then you think about, throw in an important member of the family being incarcerated. What must that do?
Just for the part that we experience when we're in the prison, just putting that person who is inmate number whatever, back into the shoes of being a mom or dad. I think that's so important.
The duck ran and ran, plop, plop, plop. The pig ran and ran, slop, slop, slop. The cow ran and ran, clop, clop, clop. Mrs. Wishy Washy ran, flop, flop, flop.
For you boys to share, I grew up with this book and still love it. Miss you bunches, Mama.
And one of the things we found out in talking with Denise is Storybook Project exists in most states, and they're always looking for volunteers.
And Kelly, the longer we sat there and talked to Denise Chai, the more I realized how important this entire project is. But I also saw that I guess she's filtering the project and the results and its meaning through her own personal frame of reference.
It's such a privilege to be able to facilitate this kind of contact. And I do try to recruit all kinds of volunteers. So sometimes we have judges and their court staff and other attorneys come in and volunteer. People for whom, criminals, shall we say, would just be a number, or, inmates are just numbers to them perhaps, or maybe they've done a lot of sentencing in the past or whatever and just kind of process some of these applications, some of these human lives. So I think it's really helpful to bring in a spectrum of people.
What was it that spoke to you about this whole project?
I mean, I've got 3 kids, and I think the things that, in everyday family life can seem like such a grind, the laundry, the dinners, the dishes, the carpool, whatever it is, right? It's such a grind, but it is also such a privilege, and I can't imagine being separated from my kids.
So we're sitting here griping about having to do the dishes after dinner, or, something mundane, and then you think about, throw in an important member of the family being incarcerated. What must that do? I
think especially for moms, it's very difficult because, so when we're in the prison, they fill out some paperwork for us because we need to know where to send the book. And for dads, sometimes it's the mom, the mother of the children, the baby mamas, whoever, who are taking care of the kids. Sometimes it's his mom or her mom. But for women, it's usually her parents who are taking care of the kids. And so she has just dumped this big burden on grandma. And so she's kind of persona non grata. And I feel like in maybe relatively more cases, the family is a bit put out.
What percentage of women prisoners do you do this program with versus men prisoners?
When we were going to, a few years ago, when we went to like a couple of men's and a couple of women's units, then it was probably twice as many women to men who were doing it. But now we've expanded and we go to more men's units, so it's the numbers are different.
What level of prisoners are we talking? Are we talking minimum security? Are we talking in regular or maximum? What?
It's a range. Yeah,
really?
We go from minimum to maximum security prisons. But to qualify to do our program, and these are criteria set by the prison system, people need to have what they call Class 2 disciplinary status. So it goes from 1 to 4. Everyone comes in as a 2. They can go up to a 1. They can, yeah. So that's an incentive for them to, to stay out of trouble.
Do you think what you're doing is worthwhile?
Absolutely, absolutely. Just for the part that we experience when we're in the prison, just putting that person who is inmate number whatever, back into the shoes of being a mom or dad. I think that's so important.
And we'd like to say a big thank you to you, the folks who tune in to listen to this program, and another big thank you to Mueller Metal Roofs and Buildings, our sponsor.
You can always follow us on social media and find out what's coming up each week. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
And don't forget to download the free Odyssey app where you can listen to this program anytime, anywhere.